Have you ever noticed that CrossFitters are incredibly jacked? Well, today we're going to talk about why that is. Hey there, Brandon Spillane here from Thirst Gym, and I'm here to tell you that CrossFitters are usually pretty freaking jacked. Now, I'm not the biggest proponent of CrossFit. I think there are better ways for the average person to get in shape, improve their health, and move better. But if you're a competitive CrossFitter or you're looking to do competitive CrossFit, it's definitely obvious that, one, those people are pretty jacked. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, there are certainly some at the very top that are certainly using performance-enhancing drugs. That's going to happen in any professional-based sport or anything you go to the top level. But even just the people that are making like regional games are usually in pretty good shape, have some pretty good muscle tone, and they overall just looked pretty jacked. So we're going to talk about why that is and how maybe you can take some stuff from CrossFit to help you be a little more jacked. Okay, so we got to break down some really quick things here about what makes somebody quote-unquote jacked. And there's two big things. One, they've got a decent or appreciable amount of muscle mass, and they're also relatively lean. And there's going to be a combination of those things that's what will make you look jacked. So you can't just be big and bulky without being lean, because then you kind of just look like a cannonball. But you also can't be really lean without any muscle, because then you actually look like an endurance athlete. And if you're running, that's fine, but you know, if you're trying to get jacked, you don't just want to do nothing but endurance activities. You got to actually build some muscle tissue. So when it comes to building muscle tissue, there's three primary ways that you're going to be able to do this to be able to optimally build that muscle tissue. And the first one is just going to be muscle damage. You've got to be able to train hard, break the muscle down, recover, and then build muscle. And once you've done that, providing that muscular damage and that stimulus is then going to tell your body, hey, we've broken this down. We need to use the fuel and the resources that we're ingesting to help build more tissue for the next time that we do that activity, right? The next thing that's great about building muscle, or one of the things you want to do to be able to optimize that, is mechanical tension. So think of volume-based activities that bodybuilders do. They figured this out a long time ago, that a high degree of mechanical tension builds a lot of muscle. That's why they like machines and cables and things that let them actually feel their muscles contract and relax and can keep tension on the muscle tissue. So that mechanical tension that you're doing over time is then also going to continue to stress the muscle, promoting hypertrophy. The third thing is then going to be metabolic stress. So if you do really, really high reps of something, say 20, 25, 30, 50 tricep press downs, you're gonna feel that massive burn, okay? And that's not lactic acid, but that is metabolic stress. You're creating metabolic stress that is getting hard to continue to perform the exercise, and that metabolic stress signals to the body that, hey, we need to work on how we recover from this exercise so that we continue to do it again. And again, this is more high rep activities than anything else, but there is also going to be that damage that comes from lower rep activities as well. That's usually just going to be your creatine phosphate system, and necessarily isn't going to build as much tissue, but the higher reps from the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, that cell getting swollen and pushed and sending signals to the body that, hey, we need to be able to recover from this, can then help build muscle tissue as well. So those are the three ways that you're going to induce hypertrophy. And CrossFit does a great job of this with many of the exercises they do, because they are pretty cyclical. There's muscle damage, there's mechanical tension, and there's metabolic stress. So if we look at some of the different WODs or workouts that they do, they're usually pairing several exercises together that are, one, pretty cyclical in nature. They're usually pretty full body. They're usually involving squats, lunges, overhead presses, pull-ups, rows, things of that nature are all great quality exercises. And when you pair them all together, you're getting this giant set of things, and you're checking all three of those boxes every single time you do those workouts. Now, they may not be maximizing the amount of load they can lift with those exercises, but all those things are there provided to build enough stimulus to build enough muscle. Now, they obviously are not being bodybuilder-esque, because again, they're not focusing directly on just maximizing hypertrophy, but it's why they get that muscle tissue that they get, because they're checking those three boxes, and they're usually doing it on a pretty freaking consistent basis with big quality exercises. Okay, the second part we got to talk about here is the nutritional side. And you got to give it to CrossFitters on this, that they really hammer in on their nutrition. They're really big on quality foods, high protein, vegetables, fruit, quality carbohydrate sources, ample water, all the things that's required to not only build muscle tissue and recover, but make sure that the food that they're ingesting is of quality and it's going to help improve their body composition over the long haul. Now, I do know that obviously at the upper tier levels, again, we talked about a little bit of performance enhancing drugs could be in the mix, but the higher the athletes you go, typically what you're going to find is that they're having better quality nutrition on top of their training. So they've got everything just synced together, and that's going to allow for optimal recovery from those three things we talked about to be able to build that muscle tissue. The other thing that encompasses this, they do a great job of training endurance as well. And so they build a high GPP, general physical preparedness, to be able to train consistently over and over and over. And so I will say, again, I'll give CrossFit this. If you're looking at improving your general physical preparedness or your cardiovascular based system, your endurance, CrossFit's going to check that box without having to necessarily do a lot of running. Again, you are probably going to have to run a decent amount in CrossFit because they are all encompassing with all the things that they do, but you aren't going to have to necessarily go run miles and miles and miles. You're not going to have to just focus on steady state conditioning. They use different mixed modalities to be able to do that. Now, I personally think that you should be able to do some kind of zone 2 work throughout the week to be able to optimize that recovery, and always training at high intensity based work with your cardiovascular work from CrossFit can probably run you into the ground over time. But as long as you're taking a couple rest days, you've got some kind of cardiovascular based work, the WODs that they do are going to do a good job at also increasing their endurance and their recovery. Now, that's important because if you're checking the muscular part, you're checking the nutrition part, you're hitting some cardiovascular portion of your training, that sounds an awful lot like what bodybuilders do. And while, again, CrossFitters aren't bodybuilders, those are all staples that make bodybuilders lean and jacked. CrossFitters are just not as heavy on the muscular piece in terms of building tissue to be as big as possible. They're trying to use that in more quote unquote functional based movements, which is why they end up looking the way that they do. And then the other thing we got to talk about too is that CrossFit does a good job at training full ranges of motion for exercises. You know, they're not doing partial range of motion stuff. So we look at like squats and different lunging variations or wall balls or thrusters, like they're doing quality reps there. And by having a good quality range of motion, you know, the training through a large range of motion is great for maximizing hypertrophy as well, because you can train at length, and that's going to be able to train through a full range of motion, let you optimize the hypertrophy a little bit, get a stretch on a muscle. The muscle getting stretched underneath load and then contracting is going to be another great way to build quality muscle tissue, and they do this repetitively over and over and over with every single workout that they do. So yeah, that's going to wrap up today's video on why CrossFitters are so freaking jacked. Now, some actionable steps that you can take if you don't do CrossFit, or you can make sure that you're doing those three things when it comes to building your muscle tissue. So I'm not gonna say you have to go do CrossFit workouts, but you can take some ideas from them. You can superset upper and lower body based exercises, limit the amount of rest at times to keep your cardiovascular work high, do some different kind of circuits. Again, using some of the things that they do, don't have to be all of them, but you know, you could certainly pair some chin-ups with some overhead presses with some walking lunges, control your rest intervals, and you can get very similar training effects to what they're doing. You're just not using the CrossFit-based movements. We're just going to take some pieces and some ideas for them, and that might help you actually improve your body composition and get more jacked. So again, I know I've been a pretty big hater on the CrossFitters in the past, and again, because I don't think CrossFit is great for the average person, but if you're looking to take something away from what they do or look the way that they do, there's clearly things that work that they're doing, and there's certainly ways that you can implement that maybe in a better manner, especially if you're not doing CrossFit. Again, if you're a CrossFitter, then you just continue to do your CrossFit stuff, eat well, and you're gonna see the progress that we kind of talked about. So I appreciate you checking in for today's video. If you happen to like this, make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment, share with a friend. I'd really appreciate it, and I'll see you at the next video.